Coming to you on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio, the world, and we are in the part of the election season coming up here in the city of Seattle, and as many of you know, we talk about it here on Rainier Avenue Radio. The election season never ends, and even though we have our local elections this year, next year we have elections for Congress, and it's going to be a very, very interesting year next year, as well as considering all that's been going on for the last several months since the primaries. And this man right here, it's so funny because people are like, you get along with Jonathan Rosenblum. I said, number one, Jonathan Rosenblum. He number one, he was so nice to me when I ran for the Senate a decade ago, if you believe that. But also Jonathan Rosenblum, and the thing I admire, he's been straight up. I mean, Jonathan Rosenblum has never lied to me. I said, I love community activist figures who tell the truth. And Jonathan, I've always considered you one of those people, and it's a pleasure to have you on today. And we are going to be discussing his book. And he just had, about a month ago, he had the coming out for his book down at First Place Books. Is called "We're Coming for You and Your Rotten System." We are coming for you and your rotten system. And we'll talk about all of those different things. We'll talk about the process of putting a book together. We'll talk about we're going to talk about the rotten system and people's perceptions of that rotten system. We'll talk about a company that has a big A. We'll talk about the elections. But it's all good to see you. And I remember when I ran for the Senate, and we had that cup of coffee, and you were there at the theater up the street. You had a young lady with you, and I saw on Facebook that your young lady and one of the young guy that was with me, they're high school seniors this year. Time flies, Jonathan.
Absolutely, it does. And
congratulations.
We got a couple Franklin kids in the family, and really excited with the school year kicking off. And it's great, but yes, time flies very quickly.
Well, it's so good to see you, and thank you so much for being here on Rainier Avenue Radio. Tell us about the book. I mean, if anyone in the last 15 years has made more impact in what you have driven. And I love what you always say. We on your website, I've been doing this for 40 years. I've been driving the rich and powerful crazy for 40 years, Jonathan. That really describes who you are.
Well, thank you very much. And I've lived here in Seattle for most of my life at this point, for over 35 years, and I had the opportunity and really the privilege of working with Kshama Sawant and so many community activists over this extraordinary decade, where she was first elected as a member of Socialist Alternative, an independent socialist, in 2013, helped to lead the fight to win $15 minimum wage in Seattle, and then went on to lead many fights for renters' rights, for racial and economic justice, and then ultimately the tax on Amazon to build social housing in our community. And these were transformative battles. And it was important, in my view, not just to talk about what we won, but how we won those fights, because that really shines a light for where we need to go today in these very perilous times.
Jonathan, tell us a little bit about your background. And as you know, I grew up here in Seattle. I am the Catholic school guy. I go to O'Day High School. And in my social upbringing and in my education, and especially in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and the election of Ronald Reagan, so we didn't talk about socialism, and the economic conversation never strayed off in that direction, and when it did, it was shut down very quickly. Tell us about how you were able to build a foundation at a time when the country was kind of moving more conservative. We had this conservative president, and we were talking supply side economics and David Stockman and all that. How did you develop this philosophy and build on that philosophy back in those days?
Yes, a great question, Juan. I didn't start out as a socialist. I started out as a worker in the newspaper industry and did other jobs as a young adult, and eventually became a full-time union organizer because I saw the need for workers to build power by organizing unions and to take on management and fight for better wages, better pay in healthcare, better patient care, better staffing. And that really was something that occupied my life for many, many years. And when I came to Seattle, I continued doing the organizing work. But what was really noteworthy to me, especially when Kshama first ran for city council and won in 2013, is I began to see the limits of trying to advocate and work for within the existing system as it is currently structured up, within the existing set of politics that defines choices, limits choices for voters and for people participating in public life. And I came to see, especially through the fights that Kshama led, the need to disrupt politics by challenging the powers that be in different ways and by building movements from the outside. And that's when I recognized we need more than just policy change. We need to actually call for socialism.
What were some of the challenges that you saw that said, this isn't a fair fight. This isn't giving this a real good opportunity for this?
Well, there's any number of things I could say, but let's take running for office for one thing. Think about how much money and how much effort it takes, and you certainly know as a past candidate, and especially with the Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling of a few years ago, right? The corporate spigots are open for candidates that support the corporate agenda. And to gain entry into that system, to really run as an insurgent candidate representing working people, you're facing extraordinary challenges. And so what a lot of well-meaning people do on the progressive end of the political spectrum is they enter politics, but then they think about how do I navigate and how do I manage and how do I tone down my rhetoric and limit my demands so I can become acceptable to people who have money, right? And for example, Adam Smith is a classic example of that, of how he's progressed from being a progressive once to where he is today, which is very far on the right. And he's done that because it's actually the way he's managed to raise money and fund his campaigns. But that happens in subtle ways too. Once you're in elected office, Kshama tells this story about how once she was elected, a couple of city council members came to her before she actually took office and said, let's go out and talk about this. And now we understand you have rhetoric and you talked about all these big ideas, but now you're in office, you need to tone things down. And if she had taken that advice, as many people once elected to office do, we would not have had the transformative decade that we had.
Let me answer this because I need to let's break down the semantics, okay? Yeah. And we hear certain terms brandished about. Sometimes the people who say them, they almost say that like they're experts and they know what they're talking about. When you ask them the question, what is that? They stammer and really don't know the answer. So I'm going to ask you this: what is a socialist?
Well, if I can reframe that and say, what is socialism? I would say that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Right now, we live in a society that is capitalist, which means that the private sector dominates, and that what you can have, what you can achieve, what you can get in societies depends on how much money you have, right? That the major things in our lives are controlled by private interests whose goal is to make profits. So for example, you have a healthcare industry, right, whose goal is to make profits for the major shareholders. It's not to provide healthcare. You have a housing industry where the vast majority of housing stock is privatized. And so if everyone needs a place to live, you have to go to a private landlord and make an arrangement called a lease and pay for housing. And the landlord can raise the rent, can not do repairs, can mistreat tenants and so on. And you have a private relationship, right? Socialism is the simple idea that we should organize society not based on making profits for the few, but on meeting the human needs of everybody. So under socialism, we would have a healthcare system that is designed to meet everybody's healthcare needs. We would have housing that is designed to make sure that everybody has housing. We would have a food distribution system that's not privatized with Fred Meyer and Safeway, but you would ensure that food is available to everybody, right? And so the simple notion is under capitalism, it's the society is organized for the purpose of private profit. Under socialism, society is organized for the purpose of social good.
From a government perspective, what does that look like? Because you hear some of the conservative and more, I guess you'd say, right-leaning opinion, people who have that opinion, they would say that, you know, we're moving into this form of socialism and communism, and it's just this government takeover. And they describe like the Politburo, which I don't ever see existing in the United States. But they're like, you know, we would become a communist country if we have a healthcare system that is formulated that way. If we did housing that way, we'd already for the most part we do education that way. And look at it, we don't want to move that direction. Because we want the individual to own the mode of production, not government. So I like, for me to frame this question is what you're looking at and what you're describing, something that is going to coexist. I mean, do we have a capitalist society with this socialist part of it, or are you suggesting that the society be built and the government and everything function around the socialist type of manifesto?
I think I can't imagine two systems coexisting because they are in opposition to one another. And there are certainly elements of society that you could say are crafted in a socialist way, like public education, but it's not really a socialist program when you set up a public education system and then you chronically underfund it. By the same token, if you allow things like rent control to exist in some cities, but then you limit it where you say, well, new housing is not subject to rent control, or when a tenant leaves their apartment, the landlord can jack up the rent to whatever they want. You don't have real rent control. And I know that some opponents of socialism and some opponents of basic things like affordable housing point to these examples in our society today. You say, see, education's not working. See, rent control's not working. Well, what's not working is a system that is starved of the funding and resources it needs to succeed. And that will never be allowed under a capitalist system, which is why, as Kshama talked about, even when we won things like the Amazon tax to build social housing, she reminded supporters that this can't be the end of the fight. We have a much bigger ambition in mind. We actually don't want to just build more affordable housing. We want to make all housing social housing, and we want to take the major companies like Amazon under public democratic control. That's our ambition in the long run. It's much more than simply winning the Amazon tax.
He is Jonathan Rosenblum. He is one of us. He is right down here on Rainier Avenue. He lives, I believe, in Columbia City.
Hillman City.
Hillman City, thank you very much. There is a designation there, but we know that for those of us that are Columbia City, Leschi, Madrona types, we know that Hillman City is just right up the street on Rainier Avenue. And he's come down about a half mile to meet with us today here at the historic Columbia City Theater. And he's talking about his new book that he just came out with a nice promotion of this book, and he had his little update on it. It is We Are Coming for You and Your Rotten System. And it is the story of how the socialists beat Amazon and upended big city politics here in the Emerald City. Let's go back to those days. Let's go back. Conventional wisdom said that, and I'm going back to the mid to late 2000s. God, that seems like time flies. I was so young back then. And I became a parent back then. But the conventional wisdom, Jonathan, was that an extreme left progressive almost a socialist candidate couldn't win. I believe that Kshama ran for the state legislature, and of course she ran I believe in the toughest race you could possibly have against Frank Chop, right? And that was where she had her first claim to fame. And then in the late aughts, or early teens, Kshama had the audacity to run for the Seattle City Council. And like you said, she was successful. Can you take us through both those elections? Can you take us a little bit through the Frank Chop election that she ran in the 43rd district when she ran for the state legislature? And, you know, if you talk to conservative types, Frank Chop is a progressive, and I'm sorry, and he's almost considered a socialist by some. And they went toe to toe. Then Kshama took on, I believe it was that.
Richard
Conlon,
yeah.
who at that time was a two-time city council member, if I'm not mistaken, and she was able to prevail in that election. Take us through that time frame.
Yeah, well, she ran in 2012, and she actually she was involved in eviction defense work. And remember, millions of people throughout America had been evicted while Wall Street had been bailed out after the crash. She got 29% of the vote. Was also
this is the race against Conlon
in 2012.
This was the race against Frank Chop.
Against Frank Chop. She got 29% of the vote against the sitting Speaker of the House, which is remarkable. She also campaigned, I believe, on 15. Was one of the very early promoters of the $15 minimum wage, and bear in mind that while some people, certainly a lot of political pundits in the mainstream, may say, well, Frank Chop, isn't he a progressive? Frank Chop was at that time Speaker of the House, probably the most single powerful person in Olympia, aside from the governor, had been for years, and really presided over a legislature that year after year after year after year denied ordinary renters the right to even have a hearing on a rent control bill. Right, presided over the most unequal tax structure in the country, right, and therefore really binding our ability to fund education and other public services at an appropriate level. And so he certainly spoke a progressive, language, but his actions were very much reinforcing a very conservative status quo that made housing less affordable, made education chronically underfunded, and denied people the basic services they need. I think that Kshama and others would say that the result that they got in 2012 demonstrated that there was a political space, that there was an appetite for radical change, and I think that is what convinced her and other members of Socialist Alternative to put her up for election in 2013. And if I may, I want to just tell you a little story.
You may.
I first met Kshama in July of 2013 when she was right before the primary election. And I was in SeaTac working with the airport workers there as a staff person for the Service Employees Union on what became the historic $15 an hour ballot initiative that they won that November. And we had a hearing in the SeaTac City Council to officially put the measure on the ballot. And as we were preparing for the hearing, this group of young activists, all of them wearing these red shirts saying 15 now, came up to me, and that's where I met Kshama, and she said it would be okay if I speak. And now bear in mind that we were trying to persuade a fairly conservative electorate in SeaTac to vote in favor of this $15 minimum wage initiative. And so we had told all of the speakers, the clergy and the airport workers and the small business owners, please just talk about the benefits of 15 for the community. Talk about how this is going to lift everyone up. Don't talk about big radical ideas. This was what the advice I was giving to people. And our speakers were really good. They were on point. And then Kshama got up at some point there was a public speak out, right? So she spoke and she said, we need to take major corporations under public control. We need to reject both Democrats and Republicans. We need to fight for these workers by supporting the initiative, but then we need to go beyond that and fight to take down capitalism, essentially is what she said. And I was quite astounded by what she said and very concerned that this was going to be used against us in the ensuing campaign. The negative campaign would be, look at who's supporting 15. And so after the meeting was over, we had and there had been hundreds of people there, and there were a handful, about 20 people left over at the end, airport workers and other supporters. And we did a little debrief of how the night went. And I said, so what did you think about the speakers? Did you like the clergy? Did you like the airport workers? And people very readily said, no, we like that Indian lady from Seattle. And I say that, Juan, because for me, it was a way to hold me accountable to workers, to understand that there was an energy and an emotion that she had tapped into with her comments that many of us had been missing. And we didn't understand how pissed off working people were, having gone through the Great Recession and seeing Wall Street get bailed out while Main Street got left out, having struggled with 2 and even 3 jobs just to make the rent. And while there's no rent control because the state legislature in Olympia is not doing anything about rent, and seeing the public education system starved year in and year out, right? And here was somebody, a political figure, who tapped into their emotions and really sparked their imagination. And that's when I began to realize that she and the socialists around her were onto something.
Moving to the Seattle City Council election, when she ran against Richard Conlon, who may not have been the biggest name in Seattle politics, but he had won before. He certainly was an incumbent. What worked? And I got. Were you surprised? Were you surprised by the results? I will be honest with you. I was very surprised. I think partly because of the district, partly because it was an incumbent, partly because people had said a socialist couldn't win. Tell us about that campaign. Tell us about what worked. Tell us about connecting with the voters in there and that legacy that Kshama had. And if you would, please just tell us about the night that she won. That had to be thrilling.
Yeah, I have to say, Juan, I was actually, since I was focused on the CTAC ballot initiative, I was not involved in the Seattle race at all. But I can tell you from my perspective, I would drive home from CTAC late at night when the organizing work was done, and I would drive through the South Seattle communities, up Rainier Avenue here, right, and you'd see progressively day on day more signs, and these were not just signs vote for Kshama. These were signs because her campaign placards called for a $15 minimum wage. You'd see these in stores, in apartment buildings, in homes, and so on. And I began to, as these signs began to sort of populate the neighborhood, I realized that maybe we're in for a special treat this November. And indeed, that's exactly what happened.
Tell us a little bit about, and we were coming up on the break, but I want to kind of get this started because obviously, as a city council member, for some people, she was polarizing. She started off really as a person of one, but she was able to really galvanize around the issue of the $15 an hour tax and the head tax, which she proposed. And to me, it kind of showed in some ways the real nature of politics and politicians. People, talk about speaking out of both sides of their mouth, and people speaking against certain things, but ultimately ended up voting with her when they were able to get that tax passed. Can you kind of tell us what went into getting the head tax and the $15 an hour foundation started?
Yeah, I can. Let me talk about 15
first
of
please.
all. Once she was in office, Kshama sort of exercised politics very differently, and she didn't count votes in the beginning. In the beginning, we had 1 vote yes and 8 votes against. Kshama spent and the other socialists around her organized in the community. They built neighborhood organizations of people supporting the $15 minimum wage. And then we had a 15 Now conference first at the Seattle Labor Temple in early January, where where Kshama and others announced that we were going to be putting forward the legislation, and then we were going to be also running a ballot initiative in case the city council didn't act. And this was a way to force the city council to act. The city council ultimately knew that if they did not pass a $15 minimum wage, they were going to have to face the voters at the ballot, and the voters would pass that $15 minimum wage. And in fact, there's a longer story behind this, and you can read about it in the book. But the in May, when discussions between the mayor and the big business and some of the leading union leaders stalled, it was a conference at Franklin High School, actually, of about 500 people on a Saturday, came together and democratically debated and voted on an initiative and on a strategy for how we were going to get the initiative on the ballot and fight for it. And that sort of exercise in grassroots democracy and the announcement of what came out of that conference at Franklin is what pushed the mayor and the political establishment to realize, oh, we've got to put legislation forward. And on that basis, they move forward.
He is Jonathan Rosenblum. He is a community activist, 40 years driving rich and powerful crazy across the country. And certainly the person who is not directly involved, but certainly involved when Kshama Sawant and this whole crew was elected and really turned our city around in regards to the idea of a much higher minimum wage. And we are still looking at that right now. And then also this progressive wave, which a couple of months ago swept through the primary election. And we're going to talk to Jonathan about that when we come back on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Are your kids eligible for or enrolled in Apple Health Medicaid insurance? Bring them to a free dental clinic in Skyway this fall. Public Health Seattle and King County is hosting free dental clinics for kids 12 and under at the Skyway Resource Center, one Saturday per month, now until December. Visit kingcounty.gov/ABCD for more information. Again, that's kingcounty.gov/ABCD for free dental clinics for kids.
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at the local Filipino community, Phil-Am Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in, Phil-Am Radio, every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
A teacher who hurt their back and got prescribed opioids. A daughter trying to cope with a loss in the family. A friend silently struggling, thinking they'll be a burden if they ask for help. People with addiction come from all walks of life. And the truth is they stand a better chance at recovery with our support. Reaching out and sharing local resources can make all the difference. Don't count them out. More people recover with support. Find more ways to help at supportaddictionrecovery.com. That's supportaddictionrecovery.com.
On Rainier Avenue Radio.world, look for the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show. I'm Dennis Weaver, your good food guide and host, helping you to feel good and look good, and who wouldn't want some of that? All that and more from the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stories, songs, and guests. Begin living the organic good food life, and the rest of your life just may be the best of your life. Always up, baby, to your health.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African-American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
And remember that Rainier Avenue Radio commercial. Tony B does a marvelous job on that. I could just hear the engine pinging at the very end as the gentleman is heading right down that route, which I think is all built up now. I think it's apartment complexes now. Every turn around and go over that turn and see that big, beautiful view of Mount Rainier back in the day on that commercial. Rainier Avenue Radio, Tony B. Something else. With us today is on your community radio station is Jonathan Rosenblum, and we have been discussing the $15 minimum wage, and this is in regards to his book, which has come out, and exciting opportunity for him to promote this really. Like I said, it's so it's special to write a book. I personally, I've written 2 now, and a friend of mine told me it's like finishing a PhD. How do you feel about that?
Except you don't get the degree.
You don't get the degree,
Yeah.
but you certainly. We are coming for you and your rotten system. And he chronicles how socialists beat Amazon and upended big city politics here in Seattle. It's available on Amazon. It's available at local booksellers. You want to promote this a little bit? Take a few seconds to promote this, because they can find a copy of this.
So you can get a copy at orbooks.com. That's orbooks.com. It's my publisher out of New York, and I think you'll be able to buy it in bookstores as well. Should be beginning this month. Elliott Bay Book Company is a great unionized bookstore. Third Place Books right here in the neighborhood is a great place to hang out, and I'm sure they'll have the book as well. And please take a look at it, read it, and then I'd love to hear feedback from folks too. I really want critical feedback, not just this is a great book, but people with questions, concerns, disagreements, absolutely. You can contact me through my website, jonathanrosenblum.org, just my name. Yep, thank you very much. And I'd love to hear from you afterwards. And I'm also around the neighborhood quite a bit, so come find me.
He is, once again, he is out here on Rainier Avenue, and we are here at the Columbia City Theater. And you're up at the Conservative, right? You're up there at Orcas. You still there? You still do some
no longer working out of there, but our house is nearby, and we're in the neighborhood all the time.
It's always nice to talk with people who are down here in the South Side. It was really interesting to hear you talk about how you built the community coalitions looking to support the rise in the minimum wage. What did Kshama have to do to get the politicians? Because at that time, I can't remember who the council president was. Was Bruce the council president at that time? Tell us about some of how she was able to pull together the coalitions. Once again, she was the one, and there was 8 other ones that she had to kind of pull together.
Yeah, I think it wasn't really on her to pull them together. It was on us to build enough of a movement so that they would feel the heat and would recognize that they had to vote, for 15. And even so, we brought them kicking and screaming into this. And even so, up to the last minute, they were looking for additional ways to propose and to implement concessions to big business in this thing. It was a power struggle every single step of the way. I remember at one point, Sally Clark, who was on the council representing this area at the time, and she said to the media, "I really hate that we're being sort of forced into this by the initiative. And I think that's a fairly honest characterization of how most of the Democrats felt, that they would rather, leave this up to some blue ribbon commission and let it either die quiet death or string it out and water it down until it really didn't mean much. But by building an outside movement, Kshama and the socialists kept the Democrats' feet to the fire and forced them ultimately to act.
Tell us, looking back on this, that was 2014.
Yes.
And let's just speak about the rise in the minimum wage. Looking back on it, 11 years into the future, 2025. What do you believe the impact has been? Critics talk about going all the way back about the rising minimum wage. It takes away from the individual and to go out and find work at a wage that they feel that they are invested at. You don't see as many high school students. I looked on the internet, and there was people who there are conservative pundits who feel that it is almost it is legislation that is anti people of color, and that these groups they don't want to pay urban teenagers $15, $18 an hour. And just giving it the eye test, I don't know if there's been any statistical tests, Jonathan. When I go by the Safeways, I don't see as many young black kids working in the Safeways. I don't see them working in some of these different positions. I see, and a lot of that isn't because of the $15 an hour wage. I see a machine there. When I check out, I see a machine that they put there. I punch in my code, I punch in my number, and boop, 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 and then I swipe everything, and a real nice person checks my receipt, and they let me out the door. Tell us what do you believe the impact has been of the $15 minimum wage? Did it have the benefits that Kshama and her beliefs thought it would? Or has the corporations, as you say, have they come up with different ways to circumvent that?
Well, I think it did two things, but let me just say, back to your example in the grocery store. Yeah, they actually, what Safeway has done is they fired a bunch of workers and they hired you to check out your own groceries, right? But are they paying you for that? No. And this is one of the ways in which corporations like Albertson, Safeways, and so on have earned record profits, right? For the CEOs, right? So for anyone to say that this is raising the minimum wage is a problem, it's like they're not looking at where the money went, right? The money that these corporations are making record profits, they can afford to pay people fairly. And besides, what is the logical conclusion? Are you saying maybe we should have a lower wage to employ more people? Maybe we could bring it down to zero. That didn't work out so well in our country, did it? Right?
And there's no volunteers.
That's right. That's right. Although I have to say there are people in government today and people who have Trump's ear who would like to see that reinstituted, and we need to take these threats seriously. But I would say there are two things that we achieved in 15. One is it made a material difference in the lives of working people. And you can hear that from talking to people who work at Target, who work in grocery, who work in other jobs, other minimum wage jobs, because it also forced other businesses who had the means to begin to bump their wages up so they could stay a little bit ahead of the minimum wage. Right? Today, the minimum wage in this city is $20.76. And that is much, much better than it would have been had we not had this socialist-led movement. Now, it's also not enough to pay the rent, because you can't simply fight for higher wages if we're not also fighting for affordable housing, affordable food, right, affordable other things. And so that's why our fight has to be more than just around wages. But there's one other thing, Juan, I want to say that I think that our movement achieved, which is that it radicalized, or it made a whole swath of people who had not been politically engaged about, one, the fact that you can make change in politics, and it got them activated. And secondly, you can't make that change if you're not involved in a fight. And this is a power struggle. It's not about having the best power policy or having good tweets. It's about organizing people together and fighting and taking on the establishment and demanding what we need.
And it's interesting, right? Because Jonathan, we at the time, and if you and I were to have a longer, more engaged conversation into the minimum wage, back in 1979, when I was 14. And I worked at Herfy's Burgers right down the street, and it's another restaurant now down by Jack in the Box, which I think is another restaurant now, but nevertheless, and right across the street from the Rainier Beach Library, where I used to sweep the parking lot, and I used to go out there and I used to scrape off the gum, all the chewing gum. I used to clean the dumpster and then make sure that all of our trays and utensils that we used were sterilized, and there was a solution for that. And I rinsed them off and took out all of the and it was it was a nice little decent job for a 14-year-old, and then I was able to gain some skills and some credibility. I was able to do that, and I at 14 I wasn't looking to take care of a family. The argument that those are the types of jobs that can help a young person develop, and I got to show up to work on time. And the other thing, Jonathan, I had a couple of bucks in my pocket. I'd walk around with 10, 15, 20 bucks in my pocket, and I felt like I could go to a movie and hang out with friends and not have to go and beg my parents all the time. But when we look at it from that perspective, and kids who are in the neighborhoods and the communities looking to develop their skills and talents, and obviously when you quickly do the math, the rate of inflation, which is another factor we have to take into account, seems like it would be somewhere right around $15 to $20 an hour in terms of minimum wage. But is that the type of wage that when we think about the minimum wage and the impact of minimum wage, should we be looking at it to be an opportunity to take care of a family, or is it meant to have this younger generation start their work careers and have some money in their pocket? Is there a distinction that should be drawn?
Well, I don't think you can think about that question without also looking at the other side of the equation, which is where's the money going in the society?
Mm-hmm.
You have a company, Amazon, that recorded $59 billion in profits last year. So what does Jeff Bezos do with that money? He has a $500 million yacht. It's over the length of a football field,
mm-hmm.
right? He's got homes all over the world. And it's not just him, it's the major shareholders of Amazon. So it's not just a question of looking at, is Amazon paying a fair wage or should there be
mm-hmm.
a training wage or whatever? It's like, given the kind of income that this company takes in, how should those riches be distributed? And I can say, as I'm actually in Amazon, that the distribution is completely out of whack. That you've got some fat cats at the top making 99.99% of all the money, and the rest of us who are doing the work at the bottom, who are bringing the revenue into the company, are getting the scraps. Now, the scraps may be $20, $25 an hour, and you can say, well, is that a fair wage or not? I say, compared to how much Jeff Bezos is taking off of the work that I'm doing, it's not fair at all.
Jonathan, one would argue that the paramount responsibility of any government is to take care of its citizens. To take care of citizens, we have in the history of our country, we have implemented a system called a police force. And I think I saw videos, and I saw different things during the opportunities during the pandemic, and I think we all saw what happened across our country with the situation that happened with George Floyd, with the situation that occurred with some of the challenges. Even here in the city of Seattle, and the situation up at Broadway Playfield. I call it Broadway, there's Cal Anderson Park and so forth. And it put our cities across America and also put our communities at odds with the police departments. Tell us about the socialist view of how we are supposed to protect our cities.
Yeah, that's a very big topic. And I would
mm-hmm.
just say that what happened, with the George Floyd uprising was this pent up anger at the police and at government for failing to provide safety for working people. I mean, you talk to people in the neighborhood here for years, and it's not just recently. who would say, the police don't protect me, right? Police killings in this city and nationally are an epidemic, right? We've got, I think, over 2,000 police killings a year now. And that is just, you look at that, it's mind-boggling for anybody to say that the police are somehow protecting us in society. And these killings are disproportionately of Black and brown young men. Let's remember that. There's a racist aspect to how the police conduct themselves in society. And so we need to step back from that and build a system in which any sort of police force would be there to serve the public, right? And not to abuse the public, to put it mildly. So what that system looks like is a much deeper discussion I think we have time for, but I think everyone would agree that the system of policing that we have right now is brutal, is racist, and by the way, is sucking all the money that we have for education and social services, preventive programs and so on, after-school programs. Think about the money, the things we could do if this city were not spending $400 million plus a year on a police force that was not meeting our needs.
Tell us in the United States in particular, or in other areas in the world, when we look at certain parts of Europe and certain countries, certain communities, that the United States remains so unique just because of a variety of different factors. But I was wondering, as we're looking at this conversation, and it's certainly in the elections here in Seattle, the police department or the city or the mayor's management of the police department certainly is playing a role in this election. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, and without going too deep, are there places that we can look at and say, hey, they've done some things that are unique, that have really built public trust and have been effective at breaking down some of these barriers as you described? Because I think there is a lot of mistrust, not only in Seattle, but in communities across the country, and especially, I think it's well documented historically with communities of color in the police.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on policing where I can say, look at what they're doing in this country or this other city. But I think that anybody in this community would look at what's going on and say there's what we have is absolutely the wrong formulation. That the police are not here generally to protect us, but rather to oppress us. And I think that's what came out in 2020. The political establishment moved very adeptly, I have to say, to co-opt certain forces in the Black Lives Matter movement and then push away others. They made some minor window dressing changes to some of policing behavior, but fundamentally the overfunding of police and the continued abuse of people on the street continues unabated.
He is Jonathan Rosenblum, and he is with us. Number one, he is one of us. He's one of our neighbors down here in the Hillman City neighborhood, right up the street from Columbia City, actually the adjoining neighborhood. His daughter is about to graduate from, I remember when she was a little girl, man. I think she was a big Juan Cotto fan. But thank goodness, I tell you, Jonathan, when I'll never forget coming home that night, and Rebecca Saldana, I told Rebecca that story. And one of the reasons why I love Jonathan, because he told me I'm supporting Rebecca Saldana, but who's a wonderful person, by the way, and who's become a good friend over the years. But my son, who was Clemente was 9 at the time, said, "I'm glad you lost Dad, because I didn't want to not see you for 6 months." And that's a relationship that's lasted for time, hasn't it, buddy? But Jonathan Rosenblum's daughter is also a senior in high school this year. I'm excited for her. And the big sisters graduated from the University of California at Los Angeles. And Jonathan is just so gracious to be here today on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And we're discussing his book. We're discussing his philosophies. We're discussing just so much. And we're also going to discuss, Jonathan, Kshama Sawant is not done.
Absolutely not.
Kshama Sawant is not done. She has stepped up and said that she's running against a very powerful congressional officer who's been an elected official in this state since he was 24 years old.
Yeah.
And he was a state senator. He was, I believe he was in the House. I believe he's been in Congress now since, if I'm not mistaken, 1998. He is a 20, what this is the 28 years, 14 terms.
Yeah.
And she says, hey, I'm taking that on.
Yeah. Well, Adam Smith, poses himself as a progressive. And in fact, he started out his political career, I think, leaning a little bit to the left, but his career really over the 28 years has been as a war hawk and really as a supporter of big business. And it is high time that someone take him on who can challenge him on the basis of his positions and can put forward a different program. And Kshama is running for Congress. Many of us are very excited about it. There is tabling going on in neighborhood communities every day. There's outreach work that's already underway. And I can say that from the people who are doing this on the ground campaign work, there's tremendous energy for Kshama's race and tremendous antipathy toward Adam Smith and what he's done. He has been, I think, in Congress, probably one of the top promoters of the U.S.-funded Israeli genocide on the Palestinian people. He's even called for people like us who've been protesting the genocide to be arrested. He has never, Adam Smith has never seen a war that he hasn't loved. Right? He supported wars in Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and the current inter-imperialist war in Ukraine. And there's no surprise then that for nearly 3 decades, his campaigns have been funded by the major arms dealers, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon. I have these notes because the list is so long. I want to make sure I remember the names. Northrop Grumman, Palantir, which is doing a lot of work to, in the tech arena to promote wars and to promote the genocide. General Atomics, Kymetra, and other companies. These companies have all funded his campaigns because they understand that he is going to support an oversized military budget. He is going to support wars, and we need to have a congressman in this district who will fight to end the genocide in Gaza, fight to stop deportations, fight for free health care for all, and taxing the rich. And that's what we have in Kshama's candidacy.
Tell us, looking at and someone who has known Adam Smith for a long time, he seems to be a little bit more pragmatic. I mean, I had a chance to sit down and talk with him on a variety of these different things, and he will come up with far more pragmatic answers. Is there, and one of the things that I've always admired about Kshama is that Kshama will tell you, at one time I said, you're not going to get the Democratic nomination. Well, I'm not a Democrat. I mean, she's straight up about that.
Right.
But once again, I mean, Adam, if he were here, and I'm sure in the debates, I mean, his ideas and his thoughts are more pragmatic in regards to why he would support a variety of those different issues that you have just described. Are you fed up with that pragmatic language, or you just don't believe that, or are you saying that the system and the style of which he has served has almost forced him to be in these types of situations? Take those positions.
What has 28 years of pragmatism gotten us from Adam Smith? Right? Is it pragmatic to support a genocide of another people? I don't think so. Right? So he can spout whatever rhetoric he wants that suggests somehow he occupies some middle end of the political spectrum or middle part of the political spectrum. But the fact is that he has been supporting wars. He has been backed by big health insurance companies. He's opposed measures to win Medicare for all, right? Even though he says, I'm for Medicare for all, he's practically opposed it in Congress, not fought for working people in that arena. The minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, is stuck at $7.25 an hour. It's been that way since 2009. What has he done around this? Is that pragmatism? If that's pragmatism, I don't want pragmatism, and I'll bet most of your listeners don't either.
He is Jonathan Rosenblum. He is with us on our community radio station, your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and we are discussing his book. We are also discussing the upcoming election with Kshama Sawant and Adam Smith of the 9th Congressional District, where Adam has been in office now, as we said, 28 years. And Kshama Sawant, who, as we all know, is the socialist Seattle City Council member who really shocked the not only the nation but the world with her election back in 2013, and was a three-term city council member, and has taken a couple of years off. Tell us what has Kshama learned in the time she's taken off? She hasn't just gone away. She was very vocal last year about the Democratic nominee for president of the United States when Vice President Harris was pushed into that position, and I caught myself laughing at a couple of her quotes. But tell us what I kind of connect this with Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seahawks, who took he was let go. He took a year off, and he was hired by the Raiders. And the first thing he said was, I took a year off, and I really kind of connected, and I saw all the way down from high schools and connected with coaches, and it really helped me. And I'm looking forward to this. And the Raiders are off to a pretty decent start right now, and you can tell that the 74-year-old Pete Carroll looks like he's been recharged. Tell us, what did Councilmember Sawant get a recharge while she took some time off?
Well, let me just say,
or out of elected office.
I'll answer that in two parts. One is you should have her on the show and ask her that directly.
I would love to do that.
You should do that. I'll help make it happen.
Please,
if you want.
please,
I
I would love that.
will. And then secondly, I think that I wouldn't say maybe what she would certainly agree, but what I would say is that if there's any takeaway from our 10 years in council office, it's that everything is a fight, but it's the organizing, it's the direct action, it's the fighting the establishment that gets the goods, and you'll be called polarizing, and you'll be called alienating, and you'll be called ineffective, and you'll be called any number of slurs. But the fact is that we know that this is a struggle. What we win is a function of the power that we have to win in the political arena. And you look at 10 years of Kshama's council membership, right? We won 15. We won breakthrough renters' rights legislation. We won the tax on Amazon. We're the first major city to win a Gaza ceasefire resolution. We won a caste discrimination ban, the first in North America, right? We won more money for mental health for young people in our public schools. That again was a fight Kshama led in the last year of her stint in the council office, and a myriad of other things. And that's the sort of fighting leader that we need going to Congress next year.
Jonathan, once again, I have always admired you from the first time we had coffee, and you said, Juan, why in the world are you running for the Washington State Senate? And my son still thanks you, by the way.
Okay.
And once again, I appreciate people who are, I've always admired your candor, and I've always admired your straightforward and your passion about the views that you have stood by for the test of time. He has been driving the wealthy and powerful crazy for 40 years, and I can see him doing that for the foreseeable future. We at Rainier Avenue Radio really appreciate you coming by our community radio station all the way down from Hillman City, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much. See you on Rainier Avenue.
You sure will. Jonathan Rosenblum on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.